Hello, I am Henry James, and it appears some bright spark in the future has decided to rummage about in my portrait of a lady with the rather alarming tools of, what was it? Iscot and ant. Well, intriguing, if a bit barbarous. You see, while my tale ostensibly concerns itself with the interior life of poor Isabel Archer and her quest for independence, this analysis suggests there's more than parlors and polite conversation at play. They argue that the burgeoning technologies of the late 19th century, your steamships, your railways, were not mere background noise but active participants in shaping the very social hierarchy that constrains Isabel. Mobility, you see, became a form of power. The ease with which Isabel, and particularly Madame Merle, traverses continents, speaks volumes about their privileged position. And the capital that fuels this freedom? It's inextricably linked, they say, to industrial production and even colonial exploits. So Isabel's drama is not just personal, but deeply embedded within the gears and steam of a rapidly changing world. Yes, the portrait of a lady still causes quite the stir, even now, I presume. This slide, you see, speaks to a rather audacious, shall we say, reading of my work. One that finds cogs and gears where others see only drawing rooms and delicate sensibilities. It suggests that beneath the surface of Isabel Archer's quest for independence lies a network of social relations inextricably linked to the burgeoning technologies of the late 19th century. Steamships and railways, for instance. More than mere conveyances, they were instruments of power. Isabel's very journey, her freedom to roam Europe, to encounter diverse cultures, is predicated on these technological marvels. But, and this is the crux of the matter, this freedom was not universally available. The ability to command these technologies, to traverse continents with ease, became a marker of social standing. Madame Merle, for example, uses this mobility as a source of influence, weaving her way through society with unsettling grace. So, yes, even in a novel about the human heart, technology whispers its presence. Yes, The Portrait of a Lady. One might not immediately consider my novel a study of technology, but beneath the drawing room discourse, a subtle engine hums. The late 19th century, you see, was being reshaped by unseen forces. Consider the steamships and railways. They shrink the world, allowing my Isabel to cross continents with relative ease. This newfound mobility, however, is not democratic. It is a privilege, a mark of social standing. Isabel's journey is funded implicitly by the fruits of industry and colonial reach, a reality often glossed over in polite society. Madame Merle, that worldly creature, understands this power intimately. She navigates these networks with a skill that borders on manipulation. Her ability to traverse countries and societies isn't just about convenience, it's a source of her influence, her subtle control. The very fabric of their lives, their possibilities and limitations, are woven with these technological threads. My characters are, in a way, passengers on the train of progress, whether they realize it or not. Yes. The Portrait of a Lady. A curious thing, isn't it, to dissect my work with these techno-historical goggles, as it were? One might think a novel so focused on the inner life would be far removed from the clang and clamor of technology, but consider this. The late 19th century, the backdrop for Isabel's drama, was a world being reshaped by steam and steel. Steamships and railways, for instance. They weren't mere conveniences, they were instruments of power. Isabel's journey to Europe, the very possibility of her cosmopolitan existence, was predicated on these advancements. And who had access to them? That was the crucial question. Isabel's relative freedom, though constrained by societal expectations, was still a privilege, a stark contrast to those tethered to their locales. Madame Merle, you see, understood this implicitly. Her mastery of these travel networks was a tool, a source of influence. Mobility in that era was power, and that power was unevenly distributed, shaping the very contours of society and Isabel's fate within it. Ah, yes, The Portrait of a Lady. One might think a novel so focused on the internal life, the subtleties of human interaction, would be quite removed from the gritty world of technology. But consider this: the late 19th century, the era in which my story unfolds, was itself being reshaped by extraordinary innovations. Steamships and railways, for example, don't just provide a backdrop. They are fundamental to the very possibilities within the narrative. Isabel's journey to Europe, her exposure to a wider world, the cosmopolitan settings, these are all enabled by these technologies. They shrink distances and connect people in ways previously unimaginable. But observe carefully. The power to access these innovations is not equally distributed. Isabel's relative freedom, her ability to traverse continents, is a privilege. It speaks volumes about her social standing, her access to capital, even the implied exploitation that fuels such advancements. My Madame Merrill, with her mastery of these networks, embodies this perfectly. Travel isn't merely a convenience for her, it is a source of power, a means of manipulation. Think on that. Ah, yes. The Portrait of a Lady. My novel, of course. One might think it solely concerns the delicate dance of drawing room conversations and the intricacies of the human heart. But consider this. Beneath the surface lies a complex web interwoven with the very technologies reshaping the late 19th century. Think of the steamships and railways, those marvels of engineering. They shrink continents, whisking my Isabel Archer across oceans and lands. Yet observe how unevenly this power is distributed. Isabel's freedom to roam, though constrained by societal expectation, far exceeds that of the less fortunate. And what of Madame Merrill, that cosmopolitan figure? Her ability to traverse societies isn't mere convenience. It is a source of power, a tool in her manipulation. Even Ralph Touchett's? Well, we shall delve into his role presently, but remember this. Technology isn't simply a backdrop. It is a player, shaping the stage upon which my characters enact their dramas. Ah, yes. The Portrait of a Lady. A curious thing to dissect with these techno-humanities lenses, isn't it? But let us not be deterred by appearances. My novel, though seemingly preoccupied with the inner life of Isabel Archer, is, in fact, deeply entwined with the technological currents of its time. Consider the late 19th century, a crucible of innovation. While I don't dwell on cogs and gears, the subtle presence of these advancements shapes the narrative. Steamships and railways, for instance, shrink continents and accelerate the flow of capital and people. Isabel's journey to Europe, her cosmopolitan settings, are all products of this revolution. But crucially, the power to harness these technologies is unevenly distributed. Isabel's relative freedom, while constrained by societal expectations, far exceeds that of those tethered to their localities by cost and circumstance. The capital enabling her travels derives implicitly from industry and colonial exploitation. Think of Madame Merrill, a master of these networks, manipulating societies with her continental reach. Mobility then becomes a source of social power, a subtle undercurrent in Isabel's unfolding drama. Ah, yes, The Portrait of a Lady. One might not immediately think of it as a story teeming with technology, but allow me to suggest otherwise. You see, the late 19th century, the very air my characters breathed, was thick with innovation. Consider, for instance, the humble steamship and the iron horse, the railways. They appear merely as background to Isabel's grand tour, yet they are, in truth, the very engines of her possibilities. These technologies collapsed distance, bringing Europe within her reach, offering her a semblance of independence. But observe carefully. This freedom, this mobility, is not universally shared. It is a privilege, you see, interwoven with capital, with the fruits of industry, and yes, even with the shadowy tendrils of colonial reach. Madame Merle, for instance, wields her cosmopolitanism, born of easy travel, as a tool. It is a source of her particular brand of social power. Even Ralph, tethered to his estate, benefits from the implicit network afforded to him by these advances. In essence, technology doesn't merely transport bodies, it shapes the very landscape of social hierarchy within my novel. Ah, yes, The Portrait of a Lady. A curious thing to dissect through the lens of technology, wouldn't you say? But consider this. My Isabel, adrift in a sea of societal expectations, is also navigating a world being rapidly reshaped by steam and steel. These marvels of the late 19th century, steamships and railways, appear almost as silent characters in my drama. They shrink the world, allowing Isabel to cross continents with an ease unimaginable just decades before. Yet this mobility, this access, is not equally distributed, is it? It's a privilege, a subtle marker of social standing. Think of Madame Merle, gliding through European society with such calculated grace. Her ease of movement, her cosmopolitan air, is not merely a personal affectation, but a tool, a source of power derived from mastery over these very networks of transportation and communication. It is the undercurrent, the hum of modernity shaping the very possibilities of my characters' lives. Ah, yes, The Portrait of a Lady. A curious artifact, wouldn't you agree? One might think my tale of Isabel Archer, a young woman navigating European society, has little to do with cogs and steam. But look closer, dear friends, for the age of industry hums beneath the surface. Consider the steamships and railways. They are not mere stage props. They are engines of change. They shrink the world, allowing Isabel to traverse continents with a freedom unknown to previous generations. But freedom for whom? The ability to command these technologies, to move with ease, is a form of power. Isabel's journey, her very independence, is predicated on the capital generated by this industrial revolution. The same revolution, mind you, that creates a Madame Merle, a woman who manipulates these very networks of travel and communication. Mobility itself becomes a weapon, a tool for social maneuvering. You see, the novel is a portrait not only of a lady, but of a world being reshaped by unseen forces. Ah, yes. The Portrait of a Lady. A work often viewed as a delicate study of a young woman's soul, but, dare I say, ripe for a more robust interpretation. You see, this slide proposes we consider the novel through the lens of technology, not as cogs and wheels, but as forces shaping social reality. Take steamships and railways. On the surface, they simply whisk my Isabel across the Atlantic, granting her access to Europe's drawing rooms and ancient cities. But consider, who controls this mobility? Isabel's freedom, while circumscribed by societal expectation, is born of wealth and industrial progress, an advantage denied to many. Madame Merle, a character of unsettling allure, weaponizes these networks, manipulating connections and traversing continents with an ease that becomes its own form of authority. Travel is not merely convenience. It is power, distributed unevenly, influencing fates and destinies with a whisper of steam and steel. Ah, yes. The Portrait of a Lady. A novel, some might say, far removed from the clang and clamor of modern machinery. But allow me to suggest that even amidst the drawing rooms and cultivated gardens of my tale, the tendrils of technology exert a subtle, yet profound, influence. Consider the late 19th century, a crucible of innovation. Steamships and railways, for instance, transformed the very notion of distance. My Isabel Archer's journey to Europe, the ease with which she traverses continents, these are products of a transportation revolution. Yet, this mobility is not a neutral force. It is a power, unevenly distributed. Isabel's freedom, though constrained by social expectations, surpasses that of those less fortunate. And Madame Merle, a creature of cosmopolitan sophistication, wields this mastery of movement as a tool, navigating societies, manipulating lives. Her travels are not mere convenience, but a wellspring of social power. The unseen engine of progress, chugging beneath the surface of polite society, shapes destinies in ways we scarcely perceive. Ah, yes, The Portrait of a Lady. A novel, some might say, of drawing room sensibilities, hardly a landscape for the clang and clamor of technology. But I assure you, dear friends, technology, like a hidden spring, subtly feeds the narrative. Consider the steamships and railways. They are more than mere conveyances. They represent the sinews of a globalized world, shrinking distances and redistributing power. Isabel Archer's very journey, her freedom to traverse continents, is predicated on this technological foundation. Yet, this freedom is not universal. The ability to harness these technologies, to move with ease and purpose, becomes a marker of social standing. Think of Madame Merle, a figure adept at navigating these intricate networks, wielding her mobility as a weapon. In my book, these technologies are not simply background noise, but active participants, shaping the very fabric of social interactions and influencing the destinies of my characters. Ah, yes, The Portrait of a Lady. One might think my story solely concerns the delicate dance of human relationships, the intricacies of a young woman's soul. But I assure you, dear listeners, the world is far more layered than it appears. Consider the era in which Isabel Archer breathes, a world being reshaped by steam and steel. Steamships and railways, mere conveniences, you say? No, they are the arteries of empire, the veins of capital. They shrink the world, allowing my characters to traverse continents with an ease previously unimaginable. But reflect, who possesses the privilege of such mobility? Isabel's journey, her very freedom, is predicated on a technological landscape that simultaneously empowers and excludes. Madame Merle, with her cosmopolitan air, understands this power implicitly. Her ability to navigate these networks is not mere social grace, it is a strategic advantage, a form of control. The subtle hum of technology is the quiet engine driving the social hierarchies within my tale. It's the unspoken force shaping Isabel's destiny. Ah, yes, The Portrait of a Lady. One might not immediately consider it a tale intertwined with technology, but consider the world in which Isabel Archer lived. This was not a world of horse-drawn carriages alone. Steamships and railways, those marvels of engineering, were reshaping the very geography of society. Isabel's journey to Europe, her very freedom to choose her destiny, was predicated on this new mobility. But mark this well, such freedom was not universal. It was a privilege, a manifestation of power rooted in industrial progress and, dare I say, colonial reach. Madame Merle, a figure both alluring and unsettling, understood this power intimately. Her ability to traverse continents, to navigate social circles with such ease, was not merely a matter of personal charm, it was a strategic deployment of technological advantage. Transportation was power, and some possessed more of it than others. My novel serves to highlight this delicate balance, this subtle interplay between technology and human destiny. Ah, yes, The Portrait of a Lady. A novel, I dare say, that some might not immediately associate with the cold clang of technology. But pray, consider this. My Isabel, adrift in the currents of late 19th century Europe, is as much a product of the age as any steam engine. The railways and steamships you see are not mere background, they are the very sinews that bind together the social fabric. They shrink distances, allowing characters like Isabel to traverse continents with a speed that would have been unimaginable to their forebears. This newfound mobility, though, is not a universally shared gift. It is a privilege, a tool of power wielded by some to control and manipulate others. Madame Merle, for instance, a woman who understands how to navigate these networks, employs this mastery to further her own designs. Thus, the novel, seemingly focused on interior lives, is in fact deeply intertwined with the technological shifts of its time. A subtle reflection on the shifting social hierarchy. Ah, yes, The Portrait of a Lady. A curious choice for a technological deconstruction, some might say. But even in my seemingly drawing room dramas, technology whispers, if one listens closely. Consider the steamships and railways. They weren't just machines, they were social architects. My Isabel, you see, embarks on a journey made possible by these very advancements, a journey representative of a new, more accessible world. Yet this accessibility was a privilege, wasn't it? Isabel's freedom to roam, though limited by social constraints, far exceeded that of the common person, tethered to their locale. And Madame Merle, a marvel of cosmopolitan maneuvering. Her mastery of these travel networks? A source of power indeed, allowing her to manipulate and control. My characters were unknowingly shaped by the gears and steam of their era, their destinies intertwined with the technologies they took for granted. It's all quite fascinating, isn't it? Yes. The Portrait of a Lady. It might surprise some to hear it spoken of in the same breath as technology, but observe closely, and you'll see it's laced with the very sinews of modernity. This slide delves into how, though I did not explicitly dwell on them, the technological advancements of the late 19th century shaped the social landscape of my novel. Consider the steamships and railways. They weren't mere conveniences, they were instruments of power. Isabel's ability to traverse continents, to engage with a cosmopolitan world, was directly enabled by these technologies. But access to such mobility was not equally distributed, was it? Her relative freedom, though constrained by societal expectations, stood in stark contrast to those bound by circumstance. Madame Merle, that cunning woman, wielded her mastery of these networks as a form of social currency. My characters' lives, their choices, their very possibilities were subtly yet profoundly molded by these technological forces. I invite you to consider the subtle yet pervasive influence that technology had on the social fabric of my story. Yes, The Portrait of a Lady. A curious choice, perhaps, for a technological dissection, but bear with me. On the surface, it's a tale of Isabel Archer's quest for independence, her illusions, and her ultimate disappointment. But beneath those drawing room conversations lies a world subtly shaped by the burgeoning technologies of the late 19th century. Think of it. This period saw intense technological shifts, and while I don't dwell on cogs and gears, their presence is woven into the very fabric of the story. Consider steamships and railways, those agents of mobility. They revolutionized travel, shrinking distances, and accelerating the flow of capital and people. Isabel's very journey to Europe, the ease with which she traverses continents, is a product of this revolution. Yet, the power to wield these technologies was unevenly distributed. Isabel's freedom, though constrained by societal expectations, far surpasses that of the lower classes. And Madame Merle, a master of these networks, using her ability to navigate societies to manipulate and control. Her mobility, not a mere convenience, but a source of social power. Yes, The Portrait of a Lady. A curious thing to examine through the lens of, what did you call it? Social construction of technology and actor network theory. How wonderfully modern. One might think my novel, focused as it is on the inner life of Isabel Archer, would be far removed from such technological considerations. But consider this. Even drawing room dramas are shaped by the world around them. The late 19th century was a period of rapid change, and while I didn't dwell on the gears and levers, the innovations of the age undeniably influenced the landscape. Take steamships and railways. They shrink distances, allowing Isabel to journey to Europe, to encounter a world far beyond Albany. But the true point of interest lies not merely in the journey itself, but in the power it represents. Isabel's freedom, though constrained by societal expectations, is still vastly greater than that of those without such access. Even Madame Merle's cosmopolitanism, her very ability to navigate society, is a product of that very mobility.